Thank you. Damien Hines?
Thank you, Chairman. As you mentioned young people, I want to talk about children in particular, both on sport participation and also exercise more generally. And there's obviously multiple government departments have an interest in that. There's your department, there's the Department for Education, Department of Health, possibly others as well. Who's in charge?
Well, for young people, behind school gates is very clearly a responsibility for Department for Education. But we have a strong interest, and we are working closely together with the Department for Education in a whole variety of areas. It's often said, you'll be particularly aware, I think 40% of all sporting and leisure facilities in the country are behind school gates, and they are not used at all to the extent that they should be used, and that's one of the goals that I've personally got, and we're starting some initiatives to try and open them up more. COVID period is not a great time to try and do that, obviously, but that's a goal we've got. But we are working closely with the Department for Education. Obviously, there's curriculum aspects here, but schools play an absolute pivotal role in getting that 60 minutes per day activity there. And then beyond school gates, then there's broader responsibilities of government and local government in terms of local authority facilities. And let's not forget the role of parents as well, and indeed the individual, to take some personal responsibility and family responsibility to get kids active and get out and about and do things as well. So you're right, there's multiple responsibilities, plus of course the overall strategy for physical and mental health well-being at the Department for Health. So there's multiple government departments involved. I would not underestimate the role of the Department for Education here, because they have control over the timetable and of course the facilities.
Just on a point of information, they do not have control over the timetable in schools, but that's an important but perhaps technical point. So in the Active Lives survey, the Children and Young People's version, which came out in January, as you were saying, for the overall picture with adults, the drop was less than feared. On the other hand, it confirmed that still more than half of children, don't reach the CMO recommended level of activity, which, as you mentioned, is 60 minutes. And actually, I think the expectation is that 60 minutes is half in school and half out of school. We've got the school sport and activity plan. When we hear from sports governing bodies and indeed sports clubs at all levels, there seems to be the will to make a really material difference in children's participation. So what's missing? What's going to get us there? A
really good question, and one that I know you would have been struggling with in your previous role. There's no easy answer here, but I think some of it does go to priorities and facilities and encouragement. And we will be refreshing the school sport and activity action plan. We'll be doing that by the end of the year, working closely with the Department for Education. And the Secretary of State at DCMS and the Secretary of State at Department for Education have had multiple meetings already about what we can do immediately to kind of on the immediate recovery. So tactically, there's a few things going on to try and make sure that we increase activity levels, including over the summer holidays. There's a active recovery hub actually on the school games website, which has had a 3,000% increase in hits, where there's a lot of advice and activities that can be done. We've been working closely with governing bodies of various sports as well, who are feeding into that to try and make sure that at schools we get more activity going in a time when many of them have been hit pretty hard. And then actually other areas, things like making sure that we do everything we can to protect local authority leisure centres. So we had the £100 million fund earlier this year, all of which has now been distributed to pretty much every local authority got something. There'll always be questions whether it's enough, but I say a lot of this does go back to facilities and availability of facilities. But then interestingly, we saw that massive increase in both adults but also in children in some of the activities that don't require significant facilities, the walking, the cycling, the running. That's interesting, because we need to keep the momentum behind that and keep that going.
And for those facilities which are behind school gates, which, as you rightly said, is a very, very large amount of it, what is stopping those gates being opened, in your estimation?
Well, some of it is then, if they're open, risk assessment, security, some of the basics, physical security, and then, this issue of, well, who would be responsible and where's the duty of care and all of those kind of things. But I think we can overcome some of those because the governing bodies of many sports would volunteer and happily take over them. I mean, there's issues, for example, one of the problems I've been hearing about is with women's football, is the availability of football pitches. Women's teams struggle because, by the time they get to book them, it's all booked out by the men's team. Yet right behind them, behind the school gate, there's a facility completely available. So opening up to not just children and not just through school activities, but opening up to other sports and making them more community facilities, which, by the way, happens in many other countries. I've lived and worked in America, and the schools are the heart of their communities. They're not just used for school sports, they're used for multiple other purposes as well, and I think there's an interesting model there. But then also, with schools, there are questions about extending and requiring more kind of extracurricular activities in the school days. I know this is always a controversial issue, but actually it seems to have a lot of support from teachers and others, of course parents as well. So I think there's that mixture between using them more for extracurricular activities within the school agenda, but also involving and engaging governing bodies to make sure they open up. It will require some investment, will require some money. As soon as facilities are open, then something's needed, but not necessarily a huge amount to make a big impact. I think we can have a big bang for the buck here because the facilities are already there.
And in terms of drive to participate, there's a particular pattern, as you know, with girls in particular who reach a certain age and participation having been at quite a reasonable level then
drops off.
Is there a plan, and there have been some great programmes, which probably one or two of which you're about to mention, but still at all, it still remains at really quite a low level in upper secondary school for girls. What is the plan specifically to help to support girls to maintain their sport and exercise participation?
Well, you probably heard from Tim at Sport England on some of these programmes, and of course we had huge success with the This Girl campaign, which actually has been reinvigorated, and that was a real learning point because it did have an impact, it resonated, struck the right notes, and actually was something we need to learn from and kind of double down on that. You're absolutely right there is something in terms of engaging girls at school and then young women into sports that they actually enjoy and want to participate in, and are we therefore pushing them to sports where they really will want to continue a lifelong kind of interest in them or not. And school is a fantastic time to engage in all sports and try all sorts of sports, and this is one of the great things about being at school. You don't have to be good at something to enjoy it and actually get benefit from it. Even if later in life you perhaps just become a fan and watch the sport rather than necessarily always participate in it, there's all sorts of benefits from it. But school is a foundation there because it's your only time in life where you get the opportunity to get exposed to multiple sports. But I think there is something about, are we focusing on the sports that girls like, or are we forcing them down to things into things that they probably are not so interested in?
And finally from me, Chair, so we talked with Tim Hollingsworth about the new sex relationships and health curriculum in school, and the opportunity that gives for physical sports and the mental health literacy, but also the need to have a kind of top-down messaging going with that. And he remarked on the success of the 5-a-day messaging. What is the role for a mass communications campaign around the 60 minutes a day exercise with a similar level of ambition as 5-a-day fruit and vegetables?
No, you raise a really good point, and I've spoken to Tim about this as well, so I'm not surprised he raised that there. It absolutely is. We want to make sure that 60 minutes a day message is as prevalent, as well known as the 5 a day. Now, there's marketing, promotion and activities that can go on with that. The governing bodies are pretty much signed up to this as well, which is important. And I say, look, we're in the process of doing the recovery of sport from coronavirus. I say the sector's been hit very hard. Its finances have been hit. Coaches and so on. We are having to recover from the ashes here. But actually there has been great interest, and we prioritised physical activities both throughout the lockdowns and since as the first things to reopen. I think that itself is a really important message. And, you see my Twitter feed, young people in particular just desperately keen to get out and about again, conducting physical activities. So that has helped. But we do need to push this message. And I think the overall government message as well on prevention in terms of instead of cure from a kind of overall health angle is an important one. It's a priority of the Prime Minister. He's gone through his own experience, obviously coming out of hospital after his coronavirus incident, saying we really want to prioritise physical activity. I'd say we'll continue to focus in that area. Sport England obviously have a key responsibility to deliver there. We do finance them to the tune of about £300 million a year through lottery and government support. But it's my job to make sure that continues.
Thank you.
Or grows.
Thank you.